They fired her the same morning we lit the memorial grill, smoke beer-folded flags, the works. Names Weldon 54 Logistics, mostly invisible. But I saw her pick up that black and gray patch like it still meant something. Ever had someone's silence shake an entire room? The first time I saw her, she didn't say a word. Not when the guards waved her through the outer gate with the same enthusiasm they'd give a plumbing contractor. Not when the tech crew at the tarmac rolled their eyes at her paper badge. And definitely not when she stepped into Ops Room 4 like a breeze no one invited in. She wore plain fatigues washed too many times, seams soft with age, rank removed or never issued. Her boots were matte black and silent. The only thing she carried was a weathered duffel and a small leather-bound notebook pressed flat to her side like something sacred. Nobody noticed. Not really. Until the colonel made us. New consultant Drennan said that morning, standing like a flagpole behind the ops table. Telemetry review, AI drift monitoring. Name's Wexler. Try not to spill coffee on her. He didn't smile. No one else did either. She nodded once like the formality was enough, then chose a stool along the far wall near the backup power trunk. That spot was a dead zone, no screens, no feeds, just cold air from the exhaust vent and the hum of forgotten wiring. She sat like she belonged there. Bo Kittredge leaned back with both boots on the table's lower rung, arms folded like a man permanently unimpressed. He looked her over once and grinned sideways at Halsey Verdell, our hotshot systems engineer. Hope she brought donuts. Looks more like someone's aunt wandered in, Halsey whispered. Laughter, a ripple of it. Even Drennan chuckled. I didn't. You spend long enough around veterans, real ones, not the desk-bound kind, you learn to feel the difference. She had that posture, relaxed but like a coiled wire underneath. She didn't fidget, didn't scan the room like she needed to measure it. She already had. Wexler opened the notebook. No tablet, no laptop, just lined paper and a ballpoint with a rubber grip worn smooth. Colonel Drennan, to his credit, kept the meeting moving. Bo gave his usual rundown of the Aegis drone's latest tantrum: neural sync lag, feedback interference, too many variables for one pilot. I'd heard it all before. The drone didn't want to be flown, that was the subtext. Wexler didn't speak, didn't ask a question. Then it happened. She shifted slightly in her seat, just enough to open the notebook wider, and something slipped out. A patch. Cloth. Black-gray, frayed at the edges with the unmistakable silhouette of a coiled snake around a dagger. It fluttered to the floor like a leaf in winter. No one else noticed except Bo. Without missing a beat, he reached out with his boot and nudged it across the tile. What's this? He said loud enough for half the room to hear. A napkin from Nam. There was a pause, the kind that stretches too long to be harmless. Then someone snorted. Another chuckle. Drennan raised an eyebrow but didn't intervene. Wexler stood, slowly. Not in anger, not with flinch or flare. She picked up the patch as if she'd done it before, folded it twice, edge to edge like a ritual, slipped it back into the notebook and sat down. Nothing else. That silence, it lingered, made people uncomfortable in ways they didn't understand. After the meeting, while the others filtered out, talking about telemetry drift and firmware updates, I lingered to clean the whiteboard. My badge didn't get me front row seats to anything, but it got me keys to the storage closet. I swapped out the markers, wiped the dust off the clock. She hadn't left. Still in her corner. Still writing. The drone footage playing in the background, ignored by everyone except her. I paused near the exit, pretending to review inventory logs on my tablet. From the corner of my eye, I saw her thumb brushing the edge of that folded patch, slow and rhythmic. Her face, unreadable eyes half lowered. The others saw a contractor. Someone brought in last minute to pad a failing program, a placeholder to check a political box. But I remembered that patch, not from a briefing or a file, from Kabul. 2007. A mission no one completed. No survivors listed. Unit Black Vipers. Except now. Maybe one. Wexler didn't look up. Maybe she didn't need to. Some things return without asking permission, and some ghosts don't knock before entering the room. She didn't ask for a terminal, didn't so much as glance at the wall of flickering data feeds or the glowing banks of overworked processors. Instead, she took the same stool near the auxiliary power trunk and sat there for 6 straight hours. No breaks, no stretching, just stillness. I came in halfway through the late shift, juggling 2 styrofoam cups of coffee and a ream of printer paper. The buzz of the overhead fluorescence made my head throb. It always did after 8 p.m. The control center was mostly empty, just a skeleton crew. Halsey was at Station 4, humming under her breath to some synth-pop track piped through one earbud. Someone in the back row cracked sunflower seeds with military precision, the shells tapping rhythmically against an empty mug. Wexler sat at the edge, head-down notebook, balanced on one knee. She wasn't writing, not exactly. Her fingers hovered just above the page like they were waiting for permission to move. Each time I passed, I saw the same thing, not inaction, but calculation, like she was listening to a conversation only she could hear. "She sketching again?" Halsey asked when I handed her the telemetry printout. "Looks like it." Halsey smirked. "Maybe she thinks we're doing performance art." "Conceptual drone warfare," she pointed. Seriously, who graphs by hand? I didn't answer right away. Instead, I looked at the corner of Wexler's page. Sine curves, pulse width dips, irregular harmonics. All lined up in pencil before our software even registered the glitch. "She's not sketching," I said. "She's flagging anomalies." Halsey frowned and turned back to her monitor. Could be coincidence. Could be. But I didn't believe it. By 2200, most of the chatter had died down. The leftover pizza in the staff fridge had fossilized, and the coffee machine was sputtering like a broken carburetor. The only warmth in the room came from the LED panels, and even that felt artificial. I made my rounds, printer queues, circuit checklists, supply cabinet counts, most of it muscle memory. But when I grabbed the stack of auto-printed forms near the corner table, I saw something I shouldn't have. A memo sandwiched between old drone logs and a misfiled requisition form. Subject: reshuttering. Ghost legacy programs. From Cold S. Adrenin AUSF Mill. To multiple recipients. Date 03 OCT 2016 2204 AHRs. I skimmed just enough to understand. Legacy programs obsolete, untracked, costly. Ghost assets marked for decommissioning. Units that had no place in future structures. It didn't say Black Vipers explicitly, but it didn't have to. I folded the memo into my binder like it was just another maintenance schedule and kept moving. Wexler hadn't noticed. Or maybe she had and didn't care. At 23:30, the feed hiccuped. A mislabel error on node 17, a routing issue that would have gone unnoticed for hours. Without a word, Wexler reached over and tapped the side panel of Halsey's screen. Just once. "Input node's wrong," she said. Halsey blinked. "Excuse me, cross feeds misaligned. Check the ghost lag on channel C." Halsey hesitated, then keyed it in. The result populated in 3 seconds. She was right. Dead silence followed. No thank you, no acknowledgement. Wexler just went back to her notebook. At some point, Halsey wandered out, muttering something about broken lattes and sleep debt. I stayed behind a few minutes longer, pretending to log out. Truth was, I couldn't stop watching. Wexler carefully tore a page from her notebook, folded it in half with the same reverence she'd used on that patch. Then she dropped it into a chipped ceramic mug, struck a match, and let it burn. The smoke curled upward in tight spirals, carrying the faint scent of old graphite, and something else, ink maybe. I caught a glimpse of what had been drawn before the flames took it, a coiled serpent wrapped around a dagger. Rough. Done in haste, but unmistakable. The black vipers again. Why burn it? Maybe to hide. Maybe to let go. Maybe because there are some truths that only make sense once they're ash. Canyon Stop Cafe wasn't much to look at. It clung to the roadside like it might peel away in the next windstorm, with a rusted Miller Lite sign out front, and windows dusted permanently opaque. Inside, the air smelled like fryer grease, burnt coffee, and old vinyl. I was already in the corner booth when he walked in. Master Sergeant Raleigh Dake hadn't been seen on Dugway grounds in over a decade, but here he was, same faded olive ball cap, same gait like he was measuring every step against some inner clock. The man moved like he was still clearing buildings. Wexler was across from me eating dry toast in quartered bites. No butter, no jelly, just bread and time. Dake didn't wait to be invited. He slid in next to me, removed his cap, and nodded at the waitress, Darla, I think, with the Vietnam daughter pin on her apron. She didn't blink twice at him. Just poured a cup and walked away. He stirred the coffee 3 slow turns before he spoke. Those damn patches, he muttered. They never stopped talking. Wexler didn't look up. You still using that back breath sink trick, he asked. Still nothing. He reached for a sugar packet, tore it open, but didn't pour it in. Just held the folded paper between thumb and finger like it might dissolve. The silence lingered long enough for the fluorescent hum to take over. Wexler reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out a diner napkin, creased soft from repeated folding. She slid it across the table. Dake unfolded it slowly, carefully. His eyes narrowed as he traced the lines. It was a diagram of the drone's power core, detailed, labeled by hand. Damn, he whispered. Still see it all, don't you? She picked up another corner of toast. I watched the two of them in quiet fascination. I'd seen plenty of reunions on base, some loud, some angry. This wasn't that. This was two ghosts passing in daylight, pretending they still cast shadows. He folded the napkin once, then again, hands trembling just slightly. Not age memory. You remember salt wire? He asked me, voice distant. I shook my head. Throw 6, out in the flats near Mawsfield. Everything went sideways. Rogue drone fried comms, entire team zeroed in under 30 minutes. He tapped his temple. 1 survivor. Nobody knew how she made it out. Debrief was sealed. His eyes turned back to Wexler. Story was. She stopped that drone without firing. Just stood there. Matched its pulse. Whispered a command code through her damn breathing. I told people they were nuts. Wexler finished her toast. But then Dake continued, pulling his wallet from his back pocket. I found this. He slid a torn corner of cloth onto the table. Frayed edge, black and gray thread, a hint of a serpent's tail. Same patch. He pushed it toward her like an offering. Your echo, he said, not a question. She didn't deny it. Just stared at the toast crust in her hand. The hum of the lights grew louder. Even Darla seemed to pause mid-step. Finally, Wexler set down the crust and wiped her hands. No theatrics. Dake reached into his jacket and slid over a small envelope. Unmarked. Sealed with old-school security tape. From someone who never got to say thank you, he said. Then stood. Just like that. He nodded to me, nodded to her, and left the diner like the wind wouldn't dare stop him. The envelope sat untouched between us. Wexler never looked at it. Outside, the sun had begun to sink below the ridge, casting long, golden fingers through the dirty glass. The booth across from us remained silent, but the air had changed. Some names don't need to be spoken. Some truths are better left folded in napkins. And some legends, it seems, still come in for toast. Later, when Wexler stood, she left the napkin diagram behind, folded neatly beside the sugar shaker. I took it, not out of curiosity, but out of respect, because legends don't repeat themselves. They echo, quietly, just loud enough to haunt the sand. They wanted Bo to fly again. He wanted redemption. The drone wanted neither. Mission Control buzzed with a restless energy that had nothing to do with caffeine. You could taste the tension, thick metallic like chewing on the foil from an MRE pack. The backup lights flickered once, a subtle pulse across the ceiling, like the building itself had taken a breath. I watched Bo suit up with theatrical precision, tugging at straps like they were stage props. His grin was too wide, too shiny. Underneath the nerves showed small tremors in his fingers, a tick in his left cheek, every time someone said, "autonomous loop." Cornel Drennan stood near the rear monitors, arms crossed so tight, it looked like his shoulders might fuse. The tech crew filed into their gallery behind the thick observation glass. They were spectators to a performance that no one had asked for. Then there was Wexler, standing near the old control console that no one touched anymore. The one without a nameplate. She wiped dust from its surface with her sleeve, slow and careful, like restoring a relic. Nobody noticed. The launch protocol engaged. Screens lit up in rhythmic bursts. Bo slid into the feedback seat, visor down, jaw set. His voice crackled through comms. Aegis 9 system check green. Preparing for uplink sync. Let's dance. We all turned to the main screen. At first, everything held. Then came the deviation. The drone veered left on climb. Not violently, but wrong, subtle, off-tempo. Bo adjusted fingers, flying across the haptic interface. The drone fought him, oscillating between half commands and self-correction. The neural sync wasn't holding. "She's resisting," he muttered. Drennan barked, "Recalibrate." "She's not listening." The tension in the room thickened, coiling. One of the interns stopped mid-sip with a paper cup trembling in her hand. I could feel a hum in my molars, whether it was the drone or my own nerves, I couldn't say. Then Wexler moved. No request. No announcement. She stepped forward, tapped a few keys on the old console. A soft whir. 4 precise inputs. Then silence. The drone stilled mid-air. Hovered. Then, with eerie grace, pivoted 180 degrees. Stabilized. Held. Blue lights bled into amber, then green. The kind of green that says for now. Everyone stared. Bo sat frozen in his seat, mouth slightly open. Wexler stepped back. That's when it happened. A soft flutter. The patch fell from her jacket pocket. It landed face up on the tile floor. Dust clung to the threads. Black and gray. The snake. The dagger. A piece of cloth, and yet the entire room shifted. No one moved. Then Bo laughed. Dry. Forced. "Well, look at that," he said, kicking the patch gently with the toe of his boot. "Guess you collect trash, too." The laugh didn't land. The sound died mid-air. Wexler didn't speak. She bent down, picked it up without ceremony, brushed it off with the flat of her hand, and slipped it into her pocket. The silence that followed wasn't comfortable. It scraped against the walls like grit caught in a fan. Behind the glass, I caught a glimpse of Dake. His fists were clenched tight enough to go bone white. Even his breathing looked different, held back, restrained. Someone coughed behind me. The kind of cough you make when words jam in your throat. No one congratulated Bo. No one clapped. Even Colonel Drennan didn't speak. I noticed the subtle shift on the monitor console lights blinking in a new pattern, red to amber, then blue, then briefly violet. A sequence I'd never seen before. Wexler turned back to the old board, fingers brushing the edge of the panel one last time before stepping away. I should have said something. Asked her what she did, how she knew, but I didn't. Not because I wasn't curious, but because in that moment I understood this wasn't a fix. It was a message. To the drone. To the brass. To us. A reminder of who still remembered how to listen when machines stopped obeying. And who still cared enough to wipe the dust off old consoles no one else would touch. I didn't see Wexler move, but the drone did. The control bay looked different at dawn, harsher somehow. The desert sun shot straight through the east-facing windows, casting long, jagged shadows across the tile. It made the screens harder to read, the stress lines on people's faces easier to spot. Bo sat rigid in the pilot seat, forearms glistening under the fluorescence. His fingers hovered over the haptic console, but they twitched, unsure. A rivulet of sweat traced down his temple. Colonel Drennan loomed near the rear, cradling a styrofoam coffee cup he hadn't sipped from. His lips were pressed so tightly they were turning pale. The brass had arrived that morning, General Cordell Eames himself, crisp as granite, seated in the glass gallery above. No one expected him to speak. Just to watch. To judge. Wexler stood near the auxiliary rack again. Not in the way. Never in the way. The launch sequence rolled out like a metronome. Screens blinked through the usual diagnostics. Voice confirmations pinged through the room. Drone Aegis 9 primed. Neural uplink active. Flight vector locked. 3, 2, 1. The drone lifted from its cradle with an elegant hum. The floor shivered ever so slightly beneath my boots. For a moment, it held, balanced, poised. Then it tilted. Not much, not violently, but wrong. The kind of wrong that whispers before it screams. The console spat out warnings. Red lights, pulse spikes, feedback loops surged. The telemetry stream turned jagged. Bo tried to correct hands jerking forward, but the drone fought back. Eames leaned forward. "Stabilize," barked Drennan. "Now!" I'm trying," Bo muttered, his breath staccato. His right hand hovered trembling over the abort switch. The room collapsed into a perfect, panicked stillness. That's when she moved. Wexler stepped across the room, not rushed, not slow, just inevitable, like gravity. No words, no shout, just the steady clack of boots against tile. She arrived at the legacy console like it had always waited for her. Her fingers hovered a beat over the keyboard. Then she rested her left hand on the folded patch in her pocket. 1 second. Just a breath. Then she typed. 4 keystrokes, each with purpose, each clicking through the high-pitched alarm like a metronome in defiance. The drone mid-dive halted. The hiss of stabilizers filled the air. Then, with an almost balletic grace, it reversed course. A perfect pivot, hovered, balanced, The telemetry screen smoothed into blue, then into the even rhythmic pulse of a stable hover pattern. Nobody spoke. Drennan slowly lowered his untouched coffee onto the console. It left a dark ring on the surface. Bo stared ahead, hands frozen mid-air, his lips moving without sound. I could see him mentally recalibrating. Where had he lost control? Where had she found it behind the glass? General Eames stood. His eyes never left Wexler. The tech crew exchanged glances. One of them mouthed something to another. I didn't catch the word. Didn't need to. Even the computers seemed to quiet down their alerts, softening into a satisfied purr. And Wexler, she just stood there. No smirk, no nod. Just the quiet presence of someone who had done what needed doing. On one of the side monitors, a forgotten email sat open. Subject line: Ghost Protocol Termination Draft 7. Sender Silas Drennan. Timestamp 0432 that morning. If next launch fails, scrap all hardware. Full asset write-down. Wexler had saved the drone. And maybe, just maybe, the entire damn project. I watched her fingers still resting lightly on the console. Her thumb brushed the patch inside her pocket once more, a gesture so small it might have gone unnoticed. But it didn't go unnoticed by Eames. He stepped closer to the viewing glass, tapping it once. The sound echoed in the room like a verdict. Then he spoke, voice low but sharp. Who, exactly, are you? It wasn't an accusation. It was an awakening. I want a real test, Eames said. Something that proves she's not lucky. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. The way he looked at Wexler, sharp, appraising, made it clear this wasn't about the drone anymore. It was about her. About what she represented. And maybe more importantly, what she threatened to undo. The test grid stretched far beyond what any camera could capture. 500 square miles of dry, rugged earth stitched with decoy bunkers, heat traps, radar ghosts, and legacy interference patterns no current AI had ever cracked. The control room was dimmer today, as if the system itself knew. This one mattered. No briefings, no side chatter, no coffee cups on dashboards, just breath and hum. Wexler didn't say anything. She took Bo's old seat, now hers by merit, not decree. Her fingertips settled on the lattice of the interface with a grace that felt rehearsed in another life. She didn't stretch, didn't blink. She simply tuned in. The drone launched with a whisper. On screen, it flicked through coordinates, hugging terrain like a second skin. It dipped into ravines too narrow for standard vectors, threaded between magnetic trip lines that had stumped training modules for 3 fiscal cycles. She didn't pilot. She listened. I stood behind her, not too close. Just enough to feel the current, to watch her spine shift fractionally with every evasive adjustment. Her breath shallow, her shoulders relaxed. At times I wasn't sure who was guiding who. Mag chaff line in Sector 9, Halsey whispered. No reaction. The drone rolled under the chaff cloud without so much as a flicker. Its thermal stream dimmed, then corrected. Not bypassed, compensated. As if it had learned to see with other senses. No AI can do that, Halsey added. His lanyard was twisted 3 full times around his finger. Unless he muttered, not finishing the thought. General Eames hadn't moved. Not once. He stood with arms crossed, feet apart, watching the feed like a man reading a language he almost understood. Drennan sat behind him, arms stiff on the desk, every so often stealing glances at Wexler, no longer skeptical, just wary. Bo was still in the room. He'd kept to the shadows all morning, leaning against a far panel, his hands in his pockets. He wasn't angry. He wasn't smiling either. He looked like a man watching a ceremony he once thought would be his. Minute after minute passed. The drone climbed a rock face no blueprint suggested was scalable. It paused, reoriented, then slipped through a blind zone nestled between two comm towers from the Reagan era. Dust rose around it, but the drone didn't register it as threat. It saw the rhythm of the particles, the patterns, the pause between gusts. It saw what we missed. I leaned closer. Wexler tilted her head slightly. Her fingers lifted barely. Then she whispered, "Target acquired." There was no amplification, no mic. But the room heard. The screen zoomed deliberate, almost cinematic. At first we saw only shadow. Then behind a line of wind-battered storage tanks, a faint oblong shimmer, a truck shielded by old, Soviet-style EM cloaks, invisible to radar and optical overlay. Until now. A beat of silence followed. Then applause, not theatrical, but reverent. Halsey clapped first, slow, a little stunned. The others followed, palms tentative, like they were afraid to wake something ancient. Bo didn't clap. He didn't stay. He pushed off from the wall and walked out. No drama, no salute. Just boots echoing down a corridor he once owned. Wexler didn't react. She unplugged the interface with a soft click and set the headset gently on the console. Her hands remained still for a moment. Her eyes stayed on the screen even as it faded into standby mode. And then barely more than breath I heard her say, "Echo." She didn't look proud. She looked whole. Like something long broken had clicked into place, not loudly, not even publicly, but enough for her to know it was hers again. And maybe, just maybe, for the rest of us to start believing it too. It took Dake 2 full minutes to walk to the front of the briefing room. He didn't rush. He didn't hesitate. He just moved like time owed him something. When he reached the edge of the dais, he raised his right hand and saluted. No one had asked him to. No one needed to. The auditorium was packed wall to wall, every officer, tech, and hangar crew in dress or dust-smeared uniform. It wasn't an order. It was gravity. The kind of gravity that settles in when rumor meets proof and people show up to see if the legend's real. Morning light spilled through the narrow, dirty glass high above. It caught floating dust in golden angles. Somewhere in the back, someone coughed. No one reacted. Eames stood beside the projector, back straight, voice level. "Today we recognize a member of a program most of you were never cleared to know existed," he said. Until now. The screen lit. First, the familiar government facade, digital folders, redacted headers, long, black bars where names should be. Then slowly, painfully, those black bars dissolved, line by line, letter by letter. Unit Black Vipers, codename Echo Deployment. Operation Saltwire, status active. Redacted for 16 years. Gasps rippled like small explosions across the rows. Some whispers followed. A few people turned toward Wexler, but she didn't move. She remained seated, hands resting in her lap, eyes calm. Eames nodded once. She flew the drone that rerouted the Saltwire corridor. That reroute saved 40 lives. Dake stepped up. His voice didn't tremble, but it carried a rust worn deep by sand and silence. "I trained her," he said. "I watched her dismantle control logic, blindfolded sync with guidance systems in her sleep. She didn't pilot those birds. She became them." He pulled something from his breast pocket. A small black and gray insignia patch edges, now restitched with golden thread. Familiar. Reverent. Whole again. He held it in both hands, arms extended not toward Eames, not to the crowd, but to Wexler. She didn't stand. She didn't take it. She just looked. And in that moment, no one doubted she deserved it. From the back row movement. Bo. He stood. Didn't speak. Didn't smirk. Just raised his right hand in a slow, steady salute. Palm firm. Eyes forward. Then Halsey beside me mirrored the gesture. Others followed, a wave of upright backs and lifted hands sweeping toward the front of the room. Not sharp. Not rehearsed. Human. Drennan was the last. He hesitated. Then he stood. No words. Just a hand lifted with the weight of consequence. The room was silent again. More silent than it had any right to be. I turned to Wexler. She hadn't cried, hadn't blinked. But for the first time since the patch fell to the floor in Chapter 1, I saw her lips curve. Not into a smile exactly. Something smaller, quieter. Peace. As Dake held the patch toward her, the fabric caught a beam of sunlight. The restitched edge shimmered faintly gold thread, catching warmth from the light, like it had waited years for this exact hour. A quiet intake of breath rippled behind me. I could almost hear the hearts adjusting in rhythm. Eames didn't speak again. He didn't need to. He stood with his hands clasped behind his back, the kind of posture worn into a man from decades of command. But there was something softer around his jaw now, an almost imperceptible drop in tension. A young lieutenant leaned toward her neighbor. Echo, she whispered like a sacred name finally unsealed. Someone else murmured, she was the one in ghost protocol, wasn't she? Rumors rising like mist over river stones. Dake didn't move, still holding the patch like it weighed more than memory. His other hand shook barely, a vibration that transferred through the thread, almost reaching Wexler without touch. She finally stood. Not with flourish, not with sound. Just rose slowly, shoulders level, chin steady. Her eyes didn't search the room. They found only Dake. She took one step forward. Dake lowered his arms slightly. A question formed between them, silent, offered in gesture, not language. She didn't take the patch. Instead, she closed his hands gently around it, then placed both his fists over his chest. It was a salute in reverse, a thank you from a student to the keeper of a name. Behind me, the seats creaked softly as people shifted forward, unsure what to do next. A woman near the back placed her hand over her heart. Someone sniffled. Wexler turned then slowly and faced the crowd. Her gaze passed over Eames, over Halsey, over Bo, and finally to me. And for a single suspended breath, I saw something I hadn't dared hope. Not command, not vindication, but dignity returned. My own hands moved before I noticed, fingertips grazing the folded edge of paper in my pocket, a printout I hadn't shown anyone. Drennan's memo about scrapping the program. It had smudged near the timestamp where my thumb pressed too hard. We almost lost her, and everything she carried. The room didn't applaud. Applause would have been noise. What they gave her instead was stillness, whole and complete. Bo stepped forward. Just 2 steps, enough to be seen. He nodded. It wasn't surrender. It was recognition. Then at last the sound that broke the silence wasn't clapping, but the creak of old hinges as the briefing room doors opened wide, letting in the wind and light from the outside. It smelled like jet fuel, old dust, and maybe, just maybe, the first breath of a new chapter. In March 2024, a new wing at Dugway's Command Center opens the Hall of Legends. I'm chosen to place Wexler's old patch in a velvet-backed frame under a brass plaque reading Black Vipers, call sign Echo. The act is quiet, ceremonial, and deeply personal. Those gathered Eames, Dake, Halsey, Bo, and others stand in silence honoring her legacy. Bo, once skeptical, leaves his own worn pilot wings on the display table, acknowledging her worth. Through the window I see Wexler standing outside. She doesn't enter, only nods once before vanishing into the desert. Her presence is felt more strongly in absence. As the room empties, I realize she never needed the spotlight. Now behind glass, her patch tells the whole story. The sunlight hit the glass just right that afternoon, casting the Black Viper's patch in a soft gold glow, not battle-worn, not forgotten, just at peace. I didn't hear applause or speeches, just the quiet hum of legacy settling into its rightful place. Sometimes we patch the past, not to hide its seams, but to honor the hands that stitched it back together. Echo didn't need a spotlight, only a moment of truth. Maybe your name won't end up on a plaque, but has life ever handed you a second chance in disguise?